I'll call you back.
Yeah, Pippi, I'm not coming into work today. I have a pest problem.
For an aardvark, press 1.
You need marine and waterfowl.
Try NYC sanitation.
Don't get too cozy in there, Penguin. As soon as I get home, you go back where you came from.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Blockbusters show. I'm Adam Sykes, and today we're going to be looking at the 2011 Mr. Popper's Penguin starring Jim Carrey. Chill out with the funniest family comedy of the year. Jim Carrey stars as Mr. Popper, a successful businessman who's clueless when it comes to the really important things in life, until he gets an unexpected present: 6 adorable penguins. Soon, Popper's rambunctious roommates turn his swank New York apartment into a snowy winter wonderland, and the rest of his world is upside down. So the question is this movie going to be just as painfully bland and generic as those movies? Kind of yes and no. This movie is based on a children's book, but in the book, the character of Mr. Popper, from what I remember when I read it a long time ago when I was in like preschool, it's about a poor painter. In this movie, they switched it up to make it more modern, so in this version, Jim Carrey plays Mr. Popper, who is supposed to be like a business tycoon who buys out buildings so that they can demolish them and build new stuff over them. And of course, it's one of those movies where, despite being a successful businessman who's good at what he does and has this really big, open, lofty, expensive apartment, high-rise, he's still just not satisfied, and he waits for the weekend to be over so that he could go out and go back to work, because he has no fulfillment when he's not with his family. And oh, tell me you haven't seen this in a Jim Carrey movie before, but he's a struggling divorced father who has a hard time connecting with his family. If you guess that sounds like Liar Liar, then guess what? You'd be right. The reason that he's like this, the reason that he puts business over family, is because when he was a kid, his father was an adventurer who was always exploring all these exotic lands and finding stuff, and he was never really around, so that kind of molded Jim Carrey's character of Mr. Popper into this. But his father ended up passing away, and Jim Carrey is called in one day and told that he's going to be receiving a package in the mail. And apparently this package was a very important package that his father wanted him to have before he passed away. So the package arrives at his apartment. He opens it up, and there's a penguin inside. So then we get the wacky shenanigans in this movie, one of like 50 million of them. The penguin running around the house, squawking very loudly. It floods the bathroom at one point. One of many shit jokes. So after a montage of Jim Carrey trying all these different numbers to see if there's somebody, like animal control and all these other people, to get rid of the penguin, ultimately he decides, okay, I'll take care of you, and he tries calling the sender, and it's some guy with like a thick, foreign, nondescript accent. He's like, I told you 5 times, I no longer want this penguin. Guy misheard him, because then he gets 5 more penguins in the mail. While all the wacky shenanigans are going on, I kind of like what they established, because they kind of start giving the penguin a little bit of a personality. Like there's a part where they're watching TV and it shows a bald eagle flying, and the penguin looks intently at it like, oh, it wants to fly. This kind of establishes a character arc for that penguin, which is later named Captain. So then the second package shows up, and now we got 5 more penguins. And of course, they all have wacky little personalities, like one's always biting, one's always squawking very loudly, one's always bumping into things, one's always snuggling up to people, and one always shits and farts. So while he's trying to get the penguins under wrap, his family then shows up for his son's birthday, and he sees the penguins and goes, oh, penguins! These must be my birthday presents! Oh, that's so cool, Dad, thanks!
6 penguins? Yes! Best birthday ever!
That's good counting, Billy.
From there, it becomes a story of the penguins help bring the family closer together. Eventually, Jim Carrey's going to get back with his wife. Again, very similar to what happened in Liar Liar, where there's something that brings the family together. Jim Carrey's character learns to be a better person, but where in Liar Liar, while there was goofy shenanigans and it was a comedy, it still felt somewhat realistic for the most part. Here, this movie just falls into the trappings of cliche family movie where, again, you have the fart jokes, the shit jokes, pratfalls, someone getting hit in the crotch, people making goofy faces. Like, for example, one of many comedic set pieces in this film is that one night Jim Carrey goes out to a charity to try and convince this woman to sell this tavern that his company is trying to buy. But the old woman being played by Angela Lansbury, but she's having this big charity for the night, and so Jim Carrey goes to try and convince her to sell her place and try and present himself as a good guy, someone that she can trust, that kind of thing. And of course, Jim Carrey hires some maid to watch the penguins while he's out. And there's this whole running gag where the penguins are like, every time you put on a TV that has like a Charlie Chaplin short, they're like glued to it. Penguins apparently love Charlie Chaplin in this world. But she ends up changing the channel by accident. The penguins then squawk loudly. She then runs out of the apartment, door wide open. The penguins then run out into the streets of New York. And they establish early on that these penguins can like sense where the person that they imprinted on, that being Jim Carrey, are at all times. So they run through the streets of New York, they show up at the banquet, and wacky shenanigans with people like looking down, making goofy faces, falling over when the penguins run by. There's a part where they end up knocking over something filled with water and ice, and the penguins slide down it. And Jim Carrey and his family get closer. He gets more attached to the penguins. The penguins are about to have babies, but one of the eggs dies, and Jim Carrey is heartbroken about that. And one thing they establish relatively early on is the bad guy, who is this zookeeper who is just doing his job. Like, this movie's stretched to make that guy a villain. All throughout the movie, he's telling Jim Carrey, hey, penguins belong in either the Antarctic or in a zoo where they're well taken care of. And eventually when the egg dies, Jim Carrey cracks and goes, okay, you know, you could take the penguins. Of course, the kids hear about this. They now don't like him anymore. Those penguins were the best things that brought our family together, says his ex-wife. Goes back to work and he no longer feels fulfilled because, gosh darn it, those penguins just warmed his heart so. And then, like, one scene after that, boom, he meets up with his kids. We're gonna go save the penguins. Like, it just jumps from sad montage, well, not even sad montage, it's just feeling bad to all of a sudden, we got 20 minutes left in the movie, let's go get those penguins. There's also one guy who feels like he was supposed to be more of a character, but he shows up in like 2 or 3 scenes, and the whole thing with him is that he's a neighbor who keeps suspecting that Jim Carrey has pets in the building, and he finds out that he has penguins, and he tries recording it with his phone, and then the phone ends up slipping and lands in like a tub of water where it breaks. That was the whole extent of that character. But yeah, going back to the zookeeper, he was not a villain. He was just doing his job. He's just trying to get the penguins back into either the wild where they belong or put them in a zoo. And they never like established that they're going to do anything bad to the penguins. The worst thing they're going to do is that, oh, they're going to like put the penguins in different zoos. And the kids are like, oh no, you can't do that. You can't break the penguins up. They're a family. That's it. Like, if this was some 90s movie, they would have made the guy like a super over the top villain, and some stupid shit like, oh, he's going to use the penguins to mine for like diamonds in the Antarctic or some stupid shit, like some wacky 90s TV movie villain. Donnie Wahlberg's character in The Zookeeper, the guy that kept beating the shit out of the Nick Nolte gorilla, that guy was more of an evil zookeeper than this guy. So yada yada yada, they're trying to sneak the penguins out of the zoo. They end up leaving one behind, and it's Captain, and Captain gets a thing in a zoo gift shop they sneak through, and it allows the penguin to fly. So, we have the Buzz Lightyear moment of, this isn't flying, it's falling with style, yeah! Angela Lansbury sells Jim Carrey her tavern, and instead of them demolishing it and building something over it, Jim Carrey cleans it up, because there it's revealed that Jim Carrey spent a lot of his time with his family. Whenever he did get to see his dad, they often went there, and it's very nostalgic for him, so he cleaned it up, made it better. Family now goes off to the Antarctic to see the penguins and visit them occasionally and help take care of them. Evil zookeeper guy is arrested, and movie ends with credits with Vanilla Ice. Like I said, super generic movie, but at the same time, it's far from the worst. There are a few occasional laughs that got me. It's often dialogue driven. Sometimes Jim Carrey would actually say something that actually caught me off guard. It doesn't have as obnoxious pop culture references as something like Gulliver's Travels, and it's not as boring and dull as something like Marmaduke. There's stupid moments in it like those two movies, but most of it just comes down to just bland family slapstick comedy. But every so often, Jim Carrey would do or say something that made me laugh. Like, there's one part where he's trying to tell the family about how he got rid of the penguins, and he says like, no, it's okay, they're in a zoo being taken care of, and it's all being narrated by Morgan Freeman. Every so often, you'd have somebody doing something or saying something to that effect, and it would make me laugh. And I will say this, if you're the kind of person that just melts at the sight of penguins, you're gonna love this movie because they do lots of cutesy stuff with the penguins. There's this running gag with this side character. It's Mr. Popper's assistant, Pippi, and she's this British girl, and she always says, every few words she says starts with the letter P. At the end of the movie, they have a punchline to her whole running gag where she meets a guy whose name is Quint, and he says everything starting with the letter Q. And I don't know, it wasn't like it was like really hysterical, but I don't know, I thought it was kind of cute. Overall, I just ranked this movie on par with some of the other more bland, forgettable family movies I've talked about. Like, families will love it. Other than that, I really don't think you're gonna get that much out of it. It's up there with things like Marmaduke and Thunderstruck and Gulliver's Travels, and I'd probably say Tooth Fairy 2, but Tooth Fairy 2 I think was a little bit more annoying just because Larry the Cable Guy was the main character. This at least has someone who's charismatic as the lead role. It's just that Jim Carrey's a little bit more reserved. Like, he's way more out there in movies like Liar Liar, which have a healthy balance of him being over the top and silly and also being serious and emotional. But here it just feels like Jim Carrey was just kind of like going through the motions with something like this. But you know what? I would take this movie over what we're looking at next time, because next time we're looking at a family movie that is a sequel that nobody asked for, and it's supposedly one of the worst movies ever made. We are going to be looking at Daddy Day Camp. I am not looking forward to that. So until next time, I'm Adam Sykes. This was the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Football step, shuffle ball lunge. Step ball change, step ball change, step ball change. Word.